Hi, everyone. Welcome to Psychology and Spirituality, a Bridge to Better Life discussion. During our weekly episodes, we explore many topics, and the goal is to get to this intersection between spirituality and psychology. And absolutely, as a result, we want to really capture timeless wisdom that you find in both fields. My name is Marcia Trajano, and with me today are my wonderful friends, Dr. Anahy Fonseca and Jussara Korngold, who will embark with me in a discussion about the unconscious. So before we start, Jussara, Anahy, how you doing?
I'm great, and I hope everybody's great too.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Anahy, Marcia. It's great to be here. So let's go get the topic.
That absolutely. So today, right? Today, we're going to talk about the unconscious, and our goal is to understand what does this mean. So, Anahy, as you are the expert in the room, can you give us, perhaps to all of us, this 101 level of what is conscious and unconscious? Can you break down a little bit for us before we can talk about it in earnest?
Okay, so, well, everyone, in a very simple way, so that we can start discussing the topic, the consciousness, right, is everything that we perceive in the world inside of us and also outside of us. And we say that the ego is the center of consciousness, right? But of course, to get in the consciousness, we need the ego to mirror what we are perceiving inside and outside of us, right? So the ego is going to say, okay, I realize that, I'm seeing that, I'm perceiving that. So this can be a psychic image. This can be part of the consciousness, okay? And the unconscious is the opposite. Everything that I can't perceive, that I haven't realized, that it's not in our consciousness yet. It can come to consciousness, but it's not yet conscious. So I think this is a very simple way to understand that we have a consciousness, that
Mhm.
we have the ego consciousness, the center of consciousness, according to Jung, that is going to say what can enter in consciousness and what is not allowed, and everything that is not allowed to enter in consciousness and it's not perceived by the ego, right, and the consciousness will stay in the unconscious.
Yeah, I'd love to for us to dive into many academic definition because that's how I think, and but I remember one time you mentioned um, the ego. We could think about it as this gatekeeper of the castle, right? Do you
Yeah,
remember talking to me
I
so long
remember
ago?
that.
Okay, right, and that's the gatekeeper knows everything that goes on from his level, its level, not at the entire level. But it's interesting that we're talking about it. But I was hoping, perhaps, that we could translate those discussions, those definitions that we should be very grateful to have had, to have access to Carl Gustav Jung's discussions and definitions and his gift to Western psychology, right? But I was wondering if we could perhaps put it into terms that touch us. And now you don't laugh at me, but I watched this movie long ago, so you are a movie buff as well. So let's see if you can find out and tell me more about how the discussion about conscious and unconscious can come from the lens of a very silly movie, right? It's a comedy, it's a fantasy, Hearts and Souls. So Heart and Souls is a 1993 Ron Underwood movie, and as I said, maybe we could explore it within the comedy, the fantasy, etc. But explore it because it brings us some interesting spiritual themes, and while light, very meaningful to us. So before we start, just to make sure that you remember, Anahy and Jussara, the story goes as follows. In 1959, yes, long ago, there are four strangers, right? And they all happen to be in a bus, and they all die in this bus, this accident. It was in San Francisco. And as they die, at the same time, this is the plot, a baby, Thomas, is born. So somehow, fiction, the four souls mysteriously become attached to Thomas, and they are able to show up. So visible, audible to Thomas, but nobody else, right? So you all can tell that we're talking about the phenomenon that many of us call the imaginary friends. So as a child, Thomas interacts with those imaginary friends, but there are things that start to happen, and his parents get concerned about his behavior. And there's a scene that is great about him dancing in school in the a boys room. And but they're all, when you see in context, it's just perfectly normal, but not so much when it's just the little boy in isolation. But anyways, he grows up, and as a grown man, Thomas now unfortunately, oh, because sorry, because of all those issues of this boy interacting so much with the friends, the strangers that are interacting with him, they see the four of them. They decide, no, 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 we're not going to interfere with Thomas. We love him too much, so we're going to become invisible to avoid causing emotional harm, right? And they are still attached, but they are the silent witnesses to Thomas growing up. And as he grows up, as I was saying, he becomes this self-centered, emotionally disconnected, and he's a businessman, I think. Um, plot twist. Plot twist here. The four imaginary friends reappear to Thomas as a grown man when they realize that they need his help. Right, that's the plot. And why do they need Thomas's help? Because they have unfinished business on Earth, and they cannot move on until those unfinished business are come to solution. So Thomas, of course, he doesn't know, he doesn't remember, he's reluctant, but through their persuasion, right, he finally agrees. And um, just a little bit of a spoiler here is that as he starts to help each one of the four souls, he start to undergo this transformation. He starts to find within him empathy, vulnerability, purpose, and I love that. So there's so much that we can unpack. This is not about the movie, but I thought we could spend some time talking about how the concepts of conscious and unconscious kind of can be discussed in light of this plot. And a plug for everyone: go watch the movie. It's available. Go ahead, Anahy.
Well, I have to make a confession here. I
Yes.
love this movie. I just love it. It's a romantic comedy, right? And Thomas, when he's a little boy, and in the story in the movie you can see right from his from I think early age, like a toddler, and talking to the souls, right, to his imaginary friends. And I think this is a great, Marcia, that you remember this movie, because it's a great example of the personal unconscious, where we have until we are, in our childhood, and even previously to that, because we now know, because of medicine and all the ways that we can identify problems, and actually not only problems, but the growth of the baby inside mother's womb, so that the
Mm-hmm.
baby perceives sounds and mother's voice and sounds, and have a lot of information. So we can see that the ego is forming, there is a consciousness forming because of the experiences that this psyche is having inside of the womb already. So since previously to birth, but then from the birth and on, when the child is developing, the
Mm-hmm.
ego is also developing, right? And the thing that is very important is that we learn about ourselves, our subjective, Jung said, personality, not our objective, because he said our objective personality, this psyche, objective psyche, he said, is actually what we truly are in the unconscious, and especially deep in the unconscious, not only in the personal unconscious. Then he called the objective psyche is
Mm-hmm.
what and who we truly are. But
Mm-hmm.
here in consciousness with the ego, we have the subject um, psyche, that it's how we think about ourselves. And how we think about ourselves is how we learn to think from, from being a little baby, from the experience with father and mother, and then brothers and sisters, and everybody else that come into our lives. So we start realizing and having experiences, especially in early childhood with father and mother, that is the basic and the
Mm-hmm.
basis of the personality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all the memories, thoughts, images, right, that we, and of course together with emotions, because then everything like has goes to an archive,
Mm-hmm.
memories, thoughts, emotions, images of our experiences, especially in early childhood with mother, father, and other people, important people in the child's development. So what happens is that Jung called, we inside of us, in the personal unconscious, all these experiences together with the emotions that accompany them form our complexes. And the main complexes are the mother and father complex and the child within, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, in this beautiful, and I think it's beautiful and funny, and
Yeah.
it's really cute movie. So, in this movie, we can see what happens in the personal unconscious, because the child, and Thomas, when he was a child, he felt loved, not only because he had a father and mother, because he had four really close friends.
And
And
can I add what I
yeah, go ahead.
thought? Yeah, that because there are four, right? So
Yeah.
it's a single mom, a failed singer, a woman who is a younger woman who is always talking about the regrets about her love life, and one who's a thief, who's just this, but from the symbolism to me, and I don't know if you're going to bring me to that, right? It's about maternal love. It's about um, the singer. It's about the idea of self-expression and purpose. that woman about love. It's about, I love this, about what is the cost of missed opportunities, right? And how important, what's the value of forgiveness? And finally, the thief of all things, he to me is a great symbolic figure about guilt and, yes, the power of making amends, no matter how small. So I just wanted to, because you're talking about what Thomas felt, he felt taken care by those four souls, right?
Yeah, in the beginning, Marcia, that's
Yeah,
what I
as
was.
a child.
So
Yeah,
that as a child, so that was his ego developing, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
the experience of really being loved and
yeah,
having fun with and taking care, being taken care of. And you were
mm,
exactly that, because he had like not only a father and mother, he had the two guys that were
yes,
like father to him,
yeah,
and the two ladies that
women.
were like
Yeah,
mother to him. But what happens, I
yeah,
think it was around 5 or 6 year
mm,
old in the movie, that since he was always talking to someone that was invisible to his biological father and mother,
yeah,
he was taken to a psychologist, a psychiatry, I can't remember, but anyhow, to a mental hospital to be evaluated. And unfortunately, we see to this day some things like that happening. But we can talk later if you guys want. But the
yeah,
important thing is that the souls understood that he was being marked as a strange, like in The Sixth Sense, other
yeah, yeah,
beautiful movie. So, like
yeah,
a strange child, probably like psychotic.
yeah,
He would be a psychotic in the future. It's schizophrenic or something like that. So, what happens is that the souls that they loved him so much. They were there since he was born, right?
yeah,
And so what happens that they decide, as you said, to get invisible. So he wouldn't they wouldn't bring more problems to his life. But at this point, when they come to say goodbye, he was a child. He couldn't understand why they are friends, and like they were like fathers and mothers to him,
yeah,
were going away. And so he felt he had a trauma. He felt betrayed, right? And he shut down his emotions and his feelings towards others. We could say, in a psychological sense, that he developed a narcissistic, defense of the he closed to other people, the
hmm,
relationship and empathy and all of that.
yeah,
So he develops kind of I wouldn't say a narcissistic personality like in a psychiatry diagnostic, but he had a narcissistic way of being, and he developed that
yeah,
towards others without empathy, without compassion, and all of that. Being very successful, material success in his life, right?
hmm, hmm,
But with a lot of difficulties to relate to other people. But what I wanted to say is that in his personal unconscious, all that experience of not being loved enough as
yes,
he felt, right?
yeah,
Of being betrayed in his love and the care that he was being given, made him develop this kind of defense to protect himself.
yeah,
But what happens is that, as you were saying, deep in his unconscious, as Jung says, and Joanna, we have the collective unconscious, we have
hmm,
the archetypes, the universally recognizable patterns of behavior
yeah,
that are fundamental in our human experience. And we can understand, for instance, the regret, the sorrow, the experience of being left alone and
Mm-hmm.
feeling angry.
Mm-hmm.
These are archetypal experience because all of us at some point are going to feel that. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's great the way that the movie brings an example of both personal unconscious,
Yeah.
that the way that the child develops and the way that the complexes are formed, that they can be positive or they can be negative, and it's kind of a balance between that, or unbalance, we would
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
between good and bad experiences, right, in our childhood, especially, but also this deeper dimension of our unconscious that we call, and Jung called the collective unconscious, the transpersonal dimension of the psyche, where we find the archetypes, this universally recognizable patterns that all of us experience. So you see that the souls also had their problems, and they had to solve the problems, and they need each other, they need Thomas to solve them.
Yeah.
But we could say that the soul's problems, the characters, the four characters, were in their personal unconscious, because it was related to the experience, the previous experience in life.
Mm-hmm.
But, and I would love Jussara to comment now
Yeah.
because it's your area, Jussara. But of course, because they were also archetypes, right? The
Mm-hmm.
story of each one, the single mother that has
Yeah.
to work so much, and
Yeah.
there is always word with her children,
Yeah.
right? And feeling alone, and
Yeah.
having all the responsibilities, and the other lady who couldn't figure out what was more important, the love of her life, or her career. And that
Yeah.
was the problem. And the other one that was a singer but could not sing, and it was his dream to sing to a great audience, so the inferiority complex. And the other one who had moral issues, right? Because he stole some stamps from a little boy. So
Yeah.
he was feeling very guilty. So, Jussara, do you think that this kind of conflicts that all of us can undergo at some point is just from one life? Or what do you think, what Joanna says about that?
Yeah, it's it's so interesting. I was laughing to hear both of you talking and talking about the movie and how much this brought to my mind the feeling of sometimes we go in the streets and we see people like they wear, I don't know, pieces of wood in a chessboard. Something, they're minding their own little square. But when we go and dive deep into, like now we are going into the life of Thomas, and there's ideas in the movie of somebody else, how each person is so rich, and there is so much behind each person, and we don't see that. Sometimes we are so much just looking at ourselves or our circle of friends, and we forget about the emotions and feelings of other people. And one thing is, when we are talking about Thomas, and it's so complex. I was here thinking, uh, the the emotional sadness that he had to go through when all of a sudden he lost the four friends, right? And
Yeah.
this would impact him, and we can see that in the movie. And so dealing with the unconscious and the repressed emotion, because at a certain point, maybe here I'm fantasizing on top of a fantasy already, but of course, if you go to a trauma like that, losing, corporeal beings or
Yeah.
corporeal beings, you
Yeah.
go through emptiness, through sadness, right? And having to adapt to that, to not having those loved figures around you anymore, and how sometimes we decided to bury deep into our unconscious, right, what we are feeling, and feeling afraid of loving and caring again, and getting disappointed. So from the spiritual perspective, we know that in terms of the unconscious, what we have in our conscious is not only related to the experiences we had in life. Like, for instance, this is very clear here. He went through the loss of friends. And so he decided to, from that trauma on, it certainly shaped his character, his emotion, to a point that perhaps he put it behind in order not to suffer more from and not to deal with that. So it is the unconscious, something that happened in this lifetime. But we don't live just once. We are immortal spirits. We have multiple lives, and we still have much more. And of course, it's not that once you finish your life, you close, like, a book that you read, you just put it on the shelf and never more talk about it. No, it's part of who you are. So we bring in an unconscious level, all these emotions, good and bad, all the talents, good and bad, inclinations, good and bad. And it's when we'll have to deal with that. And in terms of the movie itself, we see mostly from one aspect, right, which is the aspect of how it wind up affecting his personality as a young man. Right. And so I don't know, you want to comment more about the movie and what happened after, but
before we, because Jussara, with your spiritist knowledge, I wanted to maybe, just for a parenthesis here on the discussion about unconscious, but maybe, Jussara, you can also talk about some of the things that in the movie fiction, right? We talk about imaginary friends. Some of us will call those our guides, right? But in some cases, we can even call it obsessive spirits, right? Good or bad, they are bonded to that little boy, Thomas, in that case. But I just thought that maybe you can bring a little bit of your knowledge on that ability for us to be connected with our inner guides, or to obsessing spirits. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's very interesting you brought this, because we commonly know this effect as with the words spiritual attachment.
Yeah. Okay.
So definitely there was a spiritual attachment happening to this little. He was not schizophrenic, right? The movie leaves it very clear that there was nothing wrong with him. There was just something that happened, let's say the unexplainable possibility that he made a bond with those four souls. And from that point on, he was able to, see them, communicate with them, basically also feel the emotions that they were feeling, because they were so basically attached together. So when you talk about spiritual attachment, very quickly, there can be good, bad, and neutral. I would classify what was happening to him as being a neutral effect. There was not necessarily, at least not at the beginning, a purpose of, harming him. On the opposite. And there was not necessarily a purpose of, helping him. It was more, a self-help situation. All the spirits somehow thought of him as being a vessel or a possibility for helping them. But in this process, there would happen what we know that often happen when we put ourselves in a situation of helping others. We think we are helping others, but at the end of the road, we see that we were helping ourselves.
Yeah.
In learning, in the process, in healing our souls from perhaps experiences that were there in the unconscious level, but similar to this, what the spirits are presenting. So we see this clearly. So I would not go as far as saying that they were his protectors or guardian angels, because that is not the case. But this spiritual attachment, neutral one, that became this bond that led to a necessity of one helping another through this fraternal friendship way, friendship way, which is very possible, and it's what something normally happens. We just don't go away or discard our loved ones. As much as possible, we will try to be close to them, to help somehow.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to Anahy, because the movie is just brings so much for us to think about it. And Anahy, you beautifully discussed how the movie demonstrates the conscious and the unconscious through that the upbringing and the growth of Thomas, in this case, the fictional character. But I think it's important maybe for us to, if you can, talk about those aspects of our psyche uh, when they are unresolved, because we talked about in the plot unfinished business. But I was thinking from your perspective, if we can talk about the unresolved, and I'm doing air quotes here, it could be regrets, guilt, shame, missed opportunities, right? How can we talk about that a little bit, about this sense of growth, in psychologically speaking, beyond what's unresolved? Is there a correlation that maybe we can talk about here?
Yes, I think it's very important thing that, and also putting together what Jussara said, um, we are, because in psychological terms, we could also think of those souls as being part of the psyche,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's what I was,
Because
yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they were so connected to each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to
Mm-hmm.
Thomas.
Yeah.
And they stayed there as souls connected to him for many, many years, since he was a child.
Mm-hmm.
And then all through his adult life until he's a grown-up man.
Mm-hmm.
So all the unresolved, let's say, aspects of our personality that we bring right side with us to
Mm-hmm.
this life.
Mm-hmm.
So it is in our personal unconscious, of course, because we are going to have a father and a mother, and we are going to have certain experiences in our childhood
Mm-hmm.
that, of course, they lead us, let's say, to live some experiences that are going to determine the way that we live this life, right? So what Jung says, and also Joanna, and I was listening to you guys and thinking about the individuation process that we have talked many times here. But what is the individuation process from a psychological and spiritual point of view, putting together everything? It's like
Mm-hmm.
Jussara said, we are immortal beings living this material experience to evolve, to develop our consciousness in a higher way, let's say, right? Higher aspects of our consciousness. So what is important is that we are not doing this alone. It's a kind of a duality, because we are, of course, developing our individuality, but at the same time, we need each other. because we need each other like a mirror also, right? To the way that we are thinking about ourselves. So we need the relationship. We need,
Mhm.
to feel things, even projection, the mechanism of defense of projection that Freud thought was so, neurotic, because you are projecting aspects that are denied or repressed in our personal unconscious,
Uh-huh.
and you are projecting them onto other people or situations. So that would be for Freud, neurotic behavior. But
Yeah.
for Jung, he said, okay, in terms of a personal individual, yes, you can say there is a
Uh-huh.
neurotic pattern because you
Uh-huh.
keep repeating that.
Uh-huh.
But he said, when you project, you also are kind of looking in a mirror, because through
Yeah.
projection, you are going to live
Yeah.
uh, your conflict, your inner conflict in real life, in real, not real for the ego, okay, but
Yeah.
in the outside world. So then you are going to have to realize, unfortunately, yet at this point, through some kind of conflict, some
Yeah.
kind of suffering, but then you will realize at some point, living this life and not being afraid of connecting to with each other, right? Having the experiences, having the emotions that go with the experience, these experiences of, being intimate with people, friends and partners, and family members,
Mm-hmm.
even sometimes arguing and being upset with but all of these are so important for us
Mm-hmm.
to realize what is inside of our inner world, and what experience, as Jussara said, we bring with us from past experiences, other lives, that we should live again in a different way and try to learn better about ourselves and about others. And
Mm-hmm.
at the end, Joanna said, because she has a book, a beautiful book, Love, Unbeatable Love, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
All about love. So it's all about this force within us
Yeah.
that she calls a deotropism, so a movement towards God, towards this totality, and that we call God, this creator
Yeah.
that we are part of, right? So it is a movement of evolution. So I think, going back to the movie, that it was a process of healing of
Yeah.
those souls, but also of Thomas' soul, of his psyche. Because, of course, we can think then that he brought to this world issues, unfinished business. It doesn't say in the movie, but
Mm-hmm.
with your question, Martha, I was thinking in a deeper way about the movie, that of
Yeah.
course, if we had to connect to those souls, there is a purpose behind it, right?
Yes.
So of
Yes.
course maybe they were together in another life, right, Jusara? And
Yeah.
he brought to this, for instance, it's an archetypal fact of our psyche that we can have, and we have actually, experiences with fear, for instance,
Yeah.
fear of connection, fear of feeling alone, feeling of betrayal of our love, and so on and so forth. So of course we can think that Thomas brought to this life an issue, for instance, of, okay, I will learn more about love, about empathy,
Correct.
about the
Yeah.
need for connection.
Mm-hmm.
So, and can you help me, guys? Or they were from a past family,
Yeah.
spiritual family. Okay,
Yeah.
when we die, we will stick with you and we will learn together, for instance, right? Our unfinished business. So we have our personal
Mm-hmm.
issues,
Yeah.
But the individuation process, and according to Joanna, it's a spiritual process also,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
Jung, his focus was in the psychological individuation, the way to see the individuation process. Even talking about the psyche, his main focus and attention was in the psychology of it. But Joanna says, yes, the psychology of the psyche, yes, you are individuating, you are learning to balance more of your psychic experience and spiritual experience through this life. But there is a spiritual individuation that we'll have to dive inside of ourselves, the truth of our souls,
Ah,
so that we,
beautiful.
of our
Yeah.
unconscious, right? So
Yeah.
that we
Yeah.
can evolve. I hope someday I can be, well, don't laugh at me, but in my spiritual journey, maybe I will be someone's guardian angel. That will be an upgrade. I'm trying.
Yeah, and we have a few minutes, so I want to punt back to Jussara because this is fiction, right? This story is fiction, even though it brings a lot for us to learn. It's so easy to understand that. But Jussara, can you tell us perhaps a little bit about number one, and I already brought it, right? This magic feeling that there is uh, an accident in the bus and the souls become attached. Doesn't happen, right? Maybe it is, and as you mentioned, something that predated that accident that bonded those spirits. But on a different note, the whole journey of Thomas supporting, helping those souls with their unfinished business, which we've seen in many, many, many different Hollywood movies, right? We've seen in Ghost, we've seen in this one, and many more. But Josana, can you talk a little bit about the immaturity of how perhaps we think of this idea of helping to be helped? I don't know. Can you talk a little bit more about it?
Yeah, I speak about diving deep into the topic of today, understanding the unconscious. So, as Anahy very clearly explained to us, the unconscious on the, medical scientific perspective, and
Mhm.
also going into the spiritual aspect.
Yeah,
One thing we should start to understand: we
yeah,
are, again, an immortal spirit. We live more than one life, and there is a lot of mystery in us that little by little we are going to be, so they're going to be unsolved.
yeah,
Solve it. So we haven't solved mysteries that are going to be solved. And one thing that I really take for the from all of the what have been talking about here is also about calling the attention of parents, educators. Don't take the talks, the topic that children are going to bring to you for granted. Like, for instance, in this case of Thomas, he also wound up in an institution, with
mm,
without, and we know clearly that that was not the case. But at the same time, if we bring about another movie that talks about inside out emotions, it's
yeah,
so very important for us to understand about our emotions. And
yeah,
those were things that, unfortunately, up to the 20th century, we were not paying attention. So if the child would manifest a certain emotion, a certain frustration, we would say, oh, this is a spoiled child. We would not pay attention to the cries of the soul, the spirit, that is behind all that. And in
mhm,
a conscious level, because it is in the unconscious, but it is manifesting somehow because it's being triggered by the lifestyle, by things that happen, because Joanna de Angelis explains this to us. Sometimes we bring something in us that, whether it is from this incarnation or from a previous incarnation, it doesn't matter that much. Is what is a storage back here in us, right? And not in this physical body. It can't contain all the experiences we have already lived. But in terms of the spirit, yes. So it is stored there. And all of a sudden, a trip to the museum triggers something, because you see a painting, you see, if you go to the National Historical Museum, you see an animal, you see something that is going to trigger and bring about this emotion. So I think we have to pay attention to our children, to our adolescents. We are living in a time where we are seeing so much crisis in terms of children and adolescents, and even going to attempt suicides, and perhaps sometimes even successful, unfortunately, and we are not paying attention to that. But apart from that, let's pay attention to us as well. And when we see in this movie, unfinished business, we all have unfinished business. We may take two roads. It may take us to die to realize what we should have done. And now with that body, we don't have the opportunity anymore. So may use someone, as they are using Thomas as a resource, which, as you said, is not, it can happen, but it's not that common. But the most common way, the most common road for all of us is reincarnation. So you'll say, you know what? I need to go. I need to do something about it. Be it, a project that you are developing, being a frustration. Next time I'm going to work more on my vocal cords so I can sing better, right?
Yes, yeah.
And so this is the most common way, reincarnation. It's a beautiful thing that we have this opportunity. We come, it seems like, a clean slate is not. All of what we lived before is stored here. And all of a sudden it comes, like you said in Thomas, this need to, maybe I ask it to, to have some experiences in order to grow this virtue. And we will go through experiences like that. And at the end of the day, it's beautiful that there is all this opportunity, and at the same time that there is so many mysteries we have to solve.
I hear you. Yeah.
And in this journey to grow up into inner transformation.
I love it. Thank you. Anahy, do you have any final thoughts before we close? We are at time already, but I just want to say, really good to hear from both of you. But Anahy, any final thoughts? You're on mute, Anahy. You're on mute. Oh, go ahead.
Yes, sorry.
That's okay.
I was caught by my emotions hearing you guys. So, and it came to my mind. I think it was Jung that said, archetypes are the footsteps of God within the psyche. And it's a metaphorical way, right, to understand that all these experiences that, of course, come together with difficult emotions sometimes are a path, as Jussara was talking previously, are a path that, this life is a path to understand and evolution, to understand God, to understand love. So I think we have these footsteps within ourselves, within our psyche, and I think it makes me really grateful to have this opportunity, even if it's sometimes difficult. And I know we are going through difficult experiences all around the world. But these difficult experiences are a learning process of love, because we have to develop the higher values to go through them: patience, tolerance, compassion, and so on. And all these experiences are divine imprints. We could say
Hmm.
the archetypes are
I love it.
divine imprints. So let's be grateful and let's help each other, because as Jussara says, it's a mystery that it's so beautiful to live this mystery, right?
Thank you. Thank you both. I'm quite taken as well. And I just wanted to wrap it up with heart and souls, right? Because it's very interesting when we talk about Thomas and his journey, right? His path of emotional healing, and he goes from denial to repression. We know all of it. We talked about it, to integration, to connection. So he helped and he was helped. And I love it because psychologically speaking and spiritually speaking, we're talking about inner transformation through love, as you said, and through empathy, through service. So if we can bring those teachings that is in a simple, easy to watch movie, right? If we can bring all of this together, let us learn that we should really embrace ourselves holistically, right? Our past, our present, our future. And as Jussara called out, many children, many teenagers are going through crisis. So if you are perhaps going through some suffering, some pain today, let's all remember we're not being punished. We're just in the path to our own transformation. If you need help, seek help. But this is a beautiful opportunity, as Anahy mentioned, for us to really grow, to really transform. Huh. If this is the first time you listen to a program, please note this is a weekly program, The Psychology and Spirituality, and they're based on the works by Joanna de Angelis. We talked about many different people, including Freud and Jung, etc. But the work is really found as well in the psychology series of Joanna de Angelis. And we hope that you're able to perhaps get some nuggets of understanding of spiritual and psychological concepts. I want to thank you both, Jussara and Anahy. I really appreciate you being here with me. I also want to thank our sponsors, Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, and AMI Brazil. We'll be back next week, and I hope to see you then. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.